All right, everybody, welcome back to the #1 television program in the history of the entire universe. I am Brian Lee Durfee, author of The Forgetting Moon, The Blackest Heart, and The Lonesome Crown, all three books published by Simon & Schuster's Saga Press. Today I'm going to be reviewing The British Are Coming by Rick Atkinson. This is The War for America, Lexington to Princeton, 1775 to 1777. This is volume 1 of the Revolution trilogy. So Rick Atkinson here is doing a trilogy about the Revolutionary War. Before we talk about the cover and a few things about the book, I wanted to mention he also wrote a trilogy about World War II, which I read quite a long time ago. And I'm going to be rereading them for the channel eventually and doing reviews of each of these. But this is a great trilogy about World War II, which begins with an army at dawn, the war in Africa, a day of battle, the war in Sicily and Italy, and then the guns at last night, the war in Western Europe. This is a great trilogy about World War II. Fantastic. Well, he's doing a trilogy about the Revolutionary War. This is book 1. Book 2 is coming out in a couple of months. Book 3 will come out whenever. Let's talk about the aesthetics of the book, the cover illustration, the graphic design, because you know I love that stuff. I love collecting books. A lot of what I love about collecting books is I just think some of them look brilliant. And they're just great pieces of furniture to have in the house. And this has got a really elegant cover with a painting here of, you know, old colonial America. Pre-1776 America. It's got a nice little thing here. On the insides, we've got tons of maps. There are so many maps in this book. It's going to just explode your mind. There's like sections of color pictures of, you know, all the photographs of George Washington and John Adams and everything. Don't think they're photographs. Well, they might be photographs of paintings. They're paintings, you know. Anyway, there's a shit ton of this kind of stuff in here. Like every battle that's mentioned has a map to it. That's how, I mean, this is an extensively researched book about the Revolutionary War and what happened to lead up to it. That and every battle that's mentioned has a little map, which is cool. Especially the maps of like old Manhattan, which, you know, before it became the huge skyscraper village that it is, it used to just be trees and rocks and a couple cabins and things like that. In fact, they called it, what, New Amsterdam in the beginning? But anyway, so let's go through this. This begins with a prologue. And the prologue I thought was really cool. I was really wrapped up in the prologue because it was set in England. It was, we get the British side of the story, the perspective of the British and King George III going into the Revolutionary War. What are we going to do with these Americas? What are we going to do with these American colonies? They're not behaving the way that we want them to. You know, it's a huge nation over there, and it's expanding and getting bigger, and we're just England, and oh my gosh, what are we going to do? And they're not these people in America, they're not obeying everything that we want them to do. You know, the British, they wanted the American territories for themselves. They wanted the tax revenue that was being generated, and they felt like they were owed it. Like, hey, we've done so much for you all people over there that, you know, you should pay your taxes to us. And there was a lot of conflict. I mean, the Americas hate the Canadians hate the Americas, the British are starting to hate the Americas are starting to hate the British, then there's Mexico down there. I mean, there's the slave trade still. I mean, there's a lot of stuff. I mean, this book gets into how there's a lot of people even in 1776 that were like, slavery is wrong. And we'll get into a little bit of that as we go into this book review. I'm not going to do spoilers. Well, the spoiler is, the big spoiler of this book is, well, the American people won the British, they won the Revolutionary War, and we're now, I mean, the British lost. And now it's the United States of America. That's the spoiler. But we won't get into detail spoilers. We'll get into the major overarching. So then, once we get through the prologue, then we of course we start out pretty soon setting up all of the things that are kind of boiling to a head. But then we get to pretty soon in the book we get to Paul Revere's epic ride, and Rick Atkinson does a spectacular job of describing that, where he started, the towns he went through, what the aftermath of that was, what happened to him. And of course it's the title of the book, because that was what Paul Revere was shouting as he was riding his big stallion or whatever it was. He describes the horse. I can't remember. It was a big fucking horse though. I'll tell you that right now. But he describes the horse and how he rode through the Massachusetts and wherever he was riding to, and then just with the British are coming, the British are coming. That's what the title of the book is. That's the point I was trying to make. And then right after that, a lot of battles start breaking out in different places. And Rick Atkinson does a fantastic job of just showing you how savage and violent those battles were. I mean, they weren't, kind of we build up on the Revolutionary War, this like real, just like this heroic, grand, thing where, America triumphed and all this stuff, but it was bloody and brutal. And there is a lot of things. There was not much medical attention people were getting. People were lingering in their injuries. People were having legs blown off and arms blown off, sides of their head blown off, and living in agony for many weeks, months, years afterwards. I mean, it was just like each battle that took place in our Revolutionary War, people died real brutal deaths. Painful, awful, and he describes what that was like and how there was just, nowadays we got great hospital. They didn't have nothing. They didn't have hospitals. They didn't have, just lie in the mud and hope for the best, as you painfully die. So that was an interesting part, and every single battle that is mentioned in here has those moments where Rick Atkinson puts those moments into it where you're just like, OMG, I'm glad I did not have to fight that battle or any battle in the history of the world, at least for me. Probably a lot of military folks out there watching that have probably been in battles, and you know what it's like. Imagine what it would be like if you don't have the internet or trucks and helicopters and or hospitals. It's worse. So the slave trade during the war is another big kind of theme in this, in that should we let the slaves free and help us fight? Because the slaves outnumbered the slaveholders a lot. There were a lot of slaves. And people were nervous about this. At some point, these slaves are going to realize we kind of outnumber everybody. Maybe we should do something about it. So they were thinking, well, should we just free them, but they fight for us? Or do we even let them fight, or we just keep them slaves? And that was in 1776. The Civil War didn't happen until 16. Oh God, that's not right. Fucking hell. We're not going backwards, and we're not in a time machine going backwards. No, it's 1776. People were thinking about emancipation ideas at that point. The Civil War didn't happen until about 100 years later, in 1865. I was about to say 1685 again. We'll edit a lot of this shit out. But anyway, so that was another dilemma that the American people were kind of already embroiled in that argument. Is slavery just? Is it not just? So anyway, now another thing that we get is the crazy, insane ways that back in this day, disease, injuries, things like smallpox, just the insane, crazy ways that the people that lived at the time thought that they would deal with this, and their medical practices were bananas. Like bananas is all. It was just crazy. And reading about it, I'm just like, wow, no wonder smallpox was such a problem. It's because their ideas of medical science back then were just absolutely bananas. Now, I'm not here to judge. I didn't live back then. Maybe if I lived back then, I would have been doing that stuff too. probably would have been. We all would have been. We don't know what we would have done. But looking at it from our perspective now, they were crazy. They didn't know what they were doing. And it showed, and it was a big deal. It was a big deal in the Revolutionary War, the way these things were handled, and handled improperly just because they didn't know. They didn't know the science. Anyway, one of the other fascinating things, and we'll wrap this up because I don't want to tell you too many of the juicy details, because there's a lot more great little bits of history and stuff that I was not aware of, that Rick Atkinson puts in these books. There's so much of it. I only want to touch on a few things. There's dozens and dozens. But one of the things is the rise of George Washington. I was really interested in reading about this, how he became commander, leader of the armies, and also the battles that took place around New York City. I was unaware that there was so much of the Revolutionary War that just happened in and around Manhattan and the Bronx and Long Island and New Jersey, and just that area, that whole area between Boston and New York and Philadelphia, just how much that it was focused right there in the Big Apple. And I'm wondering now, and it made me wonder, I mean, like all these battles that took place on Manhattan Island, and there's maps and everything that show you where things were happening, like, you know, the battle for East Harlem and whatever. And I'm like, I wonder if there's actual monuments to these battles in Manhattan. I've been there. I've spent a lot of time in Manhattan. And I never ran across any. I never heard of it. But then again, I wasn't really looking for it. So in the comments, if you know, if some of the Revolutionary War battle sites have markers or statues or some sort of park in Manhattan and around Manhattan and Brooklyn and things like that, if there are these things standing that maybe one day I could go visit, because I'd be really interested in to see that. The landscape does not resemble anymore what it resembled back in 1776, but it would be cool to see what happened, even though if it's surrounded by skyscrapers or whatever the fuck. Anyway, The British Are Coming by Rick Atkinson. I absolutely drank this whole story in. I love these histories. I love World War II history. I love Civil War history. I love Revolutionary War history. I love medieval Viking War history. I love Crusades history. I've never been a warrior, but I like reading about it. But okay, so the Rick Atkinson, The British Are Coming, book number 1 in his Revolution trilogy. 10 out of 10. Oh my God, I just loved everything about it.